Welcome to The Inside Track, where we talk all things health, healthcare and medical insurance. Brought to you by TRA and our team of Warren, Alan and Doc Avron. Let's sit back and see what our team has for us today.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the third edition of our podcast, The Inside Track with TRA. As you know, we've got Dr. Avron here. Before we start anything, I must tell you the response to our podcast has been great. Dr. Avron, what is the address people can use if they want to engage with us?
Yeah, well, just to say hello everyone, so great to be here on our next podcast. It's Ask Dr. Avron at totalrisksa.co.za. We will put it on the screen for everybody.
Excellent.
But yeah, it was so successful. The last one had so much input, and look forward to this podcast.
Yeah, good stuff. I mean, in today's episode, you got some great information. You had that lovely interview with one of your colleagues on a topic which I'll let you introduce.
Great.
Alan's not with us, as you can see, but I was able to chat to him earlier about a very interesting topic and a question that we always ask. And then I'm going to actually cover some of the questions that have come in regarding the myths of gap cover. We like to call it Gap Cover 101.
Yes.
So we'll cover some of those just now. But maybe give us some insight into the conversation you had with one of your colleagues earlier.
Well, we'll do. Warren, you and I chatting, and certainly my experience in the field, one of the big growing areas in worldwide and South Africa is mental wellness. We know it's the numbers of the mental disease that's shooting through the roof, skyrocketing both around the world, internationally post-COVID and South Africa. And we're finding that a lot of our members have mental wellness issues. Want to know more information about it, and it's becoming a hot trending topic. So we thought, let's delve into it a bit deeper today. And I contacted one of my colleagues, Dr. Shana Safa. She's a psychiatrist based in Johannesburg, but works in many areas of psychiatry and is well known and renowned. And we really delved into the topic. And this is what she had to say on mental wellness and disease.
Great, let's take a look.
Great. Dr. Shana Safa, so happy to have you on this podcast, and welcome.
So happy to be here.
Great. Let's kick off and start the conversation, and just start with the basics for our listeners, right? How do we define mental illness, and how common are conditions like stress, anxiety, and depression? And I suppose, is the incidence increasing?
Wow, that's quite a loaded question. What did you say? Stress, anxiety, and depression.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't call stress an illness. Let's start there. Stress is a physiological state, because if you actually look at the stress response or the stress functionality curve on a graph, we all need some stress as human beings in order to perform. If you have no stress whatsoever, you will be a lump lying in your bed all day. But you need to earn a living, you need to feed your family, you need to work, you need to advance yourself at work. All these little stresses build up, and they actually give us some natural enthusiasm and motivation. The issue is when the stress gets too much, it becomes a bell-shaped curve. As the stress passes a critical point, our functionality starts to decrease. So when you ask what is mental illness,
Yes.
It doesn't matter what the actual diagnosis is. Illness or pathology is defined by a person's drop in functionality in certain areas of their life. For example, their social relationships, their academic, if they're at school, or their occupational, if they're at work performance, and then their marital or spousal relationships.
Okay, so I think that's an excellent way of putting it. So for our listeners, if there's a change in their functionality, then the various stresses or anxiety, as you say, which actually in some ways in normal day life may be a good thing, then it's actually becoming an illness. Let's put it like that. Would you say that, before we go into some consequences of that, but just as a general broad statement, that mental illness is actually increasing in incidence in the world?
It's definitely increasing in incidence, and you can even see that from just lay podcasts. And if you turn on YouTube, half the stuff is about Donald Trump and Elon Musk, and half the stuff is about mental wellness, mental illness. All the guys who are doing the podcasts, the Diary of a CEO, the Mel Robbinses, they're all talking about how to maintain mental wellness. When I was a medical student, back in the late 80s, and then when I started psychiatry, I remember there was a brief from the World Health Organization. The World Health Organization put out a memo that said, by 2020, 50% of the world's population will suffer from some form of depression. And we all young psychiatry students were like, oh, we're going to be so busy. Actually, I think it's worse than that.
Really, hey?
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. So we're saying about we're approaching that significant numbers in our population have mental illness. What would you ascribe that due to? What's the cause of that? Why is it increasing?
Well, let's look at the fact that mental illness or mental wellness, but it's a flip side. It relies on a number of different factors. So we're actually looking very, very baseline. I guess we've spoken about stress, but we're looking at levels of physical wellness as well. So just basic stuff, your nutrition, your vitamin levels, your immune system, your basic ability to fight off viruses and bacteria. So you start off over there. And then looking at your tools. Now, by tools in the so-called mental wellness toolkit, it is, what are your coping strategies? How do you cope, and what tools have you got to arm yourself with when stressors are going to come at you, which they do every day, even if it's a silly stress like like being stuck in traffic on the way to work, or in our country, as you know, the robots aren't working. So now you might be late for work and your stress level builds up. Is my boss going to be angry with me? Am I going to get a warning? So it's about having tools to actually immediately reduce distress, and also to be able to negotiate issues that might come up. So these are all layering things. The big thing I would also say is your quality of your social system and your support system. People who spend their time on their own, or maybe only online, and aren't really, and we'll maybe get into this later, but aren't really communicating on an ongoing basis with other people, I think can often end up finding life very difficult and lapsing into certain of the so-called mental illness states.
So, Chanel, are you saying that in 2025, there are more triggers or stresses, if you want to say it like that, than 25 years ago? And hence people don't have the toolkits or the ability to deal with them, and that is why we have increasing mental illness.
Well, I would say that certainly is a factor, in that the world has developed and the technology has developed so quickly that I think our minds and brains and physiologies actually haven't kept up. I mean, when we were kids, our dads used to come home from work at 5 o'clock and throw a ball in the garden with us, or walk the dog. I mean, I've now got a son in his 20s who's doing an internship in a business company. He walks in from work at 7:45 at night, like it's normal.
Yeah, sure. So technology hasn't helped. Let's start there.
I think part of the technology maybe that hasn't helped is that we are bombarded. We are bombarded with information 24/7. And unless we actually turn off and switch off, we really run the risk of becoming overloaded. And I mean, cognitively, brain-wise overloaded, and burnt out. We almost sometimes feel that our brain has fused.
Yeah. Can we move on to South Africa? Seeing most of our podcast listeners will be based in South Africa. Is South Africa a particularly stressful environment to live in? And what are the stresses that would be increasing or giving us a high incidence of mental illness?
So I think that South Africa is definitely an extremely stressful, it's been a stressful society to live in. And I think that most of us don't even realize the extent of the stresses. And it doesn't matter what stratosphere of population and area that you live in. We all have been facing certain hard truths. Levels of crime are very high. And I think that many, many people have been affected by crime in different ways and carry a level of some form of post-traumatic stress, one way or the other, as a baseline even. I think that because of all the uncertainties regarding our delivery, our service delivery lately, our electricity, our lights, our water, and also the fact that the economy has not been good. I'm not saying that's South Africa only, but a lot of people are really experiencing, penny pinching at the moment. And financial stress is a big stress. So when you look at it all together, levels of unemployment, more bombardment, competition for jobs in the workplace, and then your basic kind of, running water. I mean, we've had water outages lately as well as lights.
Yes.
So I think that South Africans, I think that we are very resilient as a nation.
Yes.
As well. And resilience is something else we can talk about, because it's actually got to do with your toolkit as well as your resilience determines whether you actually fall over that precipice and actually start to develop symptoms which are deemed pathological.
Yeah, we're definitely going to get onto that toolkit. So I'm sort of working on being clinically affected, and the common mental illnesses being depression and anxiety. I think that would be what most of our population is experiencing when we say there's been an increase in incidence. What red flags, and I suppose this is one of the key points we want to bring out in this podcast, because people don't often know they have mental illness. But what red flags should people watch out for in themselves, or loved ones, or friends, or community, etc., that indicate that they actually have a mental health issue?
Right. So I think the big take-home message here is, if a person has changed, if there's a change of their functioning, of how they used to be and how they are now, that's number one. So the change can be noticing, for example, that if it's a child or an adolescent, that their marks are dropping at school. A change could be a person who was always attending functions and being social, preferring to stay at home. So it's just a change in functioning, which can be subtle, but it's also looking at rising levels of irritability, number one. So when people become more emotional, more triggerable, more quick to get frustrated and angry, that is a warning sign. That's almost one of the earliest signs of depression, is this rising irritability, okay? People say they're more snappy towards their spouses or their kids, okay, that kind of thing. So that's the one. The other thing is problems in sleep. Now we call these, it's actually sleep and appetite. We call it neurovegetative issues, but it's when the basic physiological system is not functioning as well anymore. So either people feeling not hungry and losing weight for no reason. Well, reason being that they're not eating, but not for other reasons. And if you notice a consistent problem with sleep, now it could be falling asleep being a problem. We call that initial insomnia, or waking up frequently in the middle of the night and unable to go back to sleep. That's called mid-insomnia. Or terminal insomnia, where you're waking up maybe an hour earlier than you should be, and you're unable to actually stay asleep until your alarm goes off in the morning.
Okay, so changes in your emotional state and the way you interact with your loved ones and community, etc., and changes in your physical state, as you said, sleep, diet, and I suppose any other physical changes that are that are noticeable, and there are no other explanations for them.
Like in fact, now that you mention it, yes, sleep, yes, appetite, and a feeling of fatigue. A feeling of constant fatigue. And also people complain about something we call brain fog. And whether it's the brain fog of a woman who is has recently given birth, or the brain fog of a woman whose hormonal system is changing, or the brain fog of someone who is suffering from burnout. That's a word we use where we just can't focus, and we haven't got that clarity of thought that we used to have, and maybe we've got small little memory issues. So these are very subtle, small signs that stress is creeping in.
Wow, everyone, that is fantastic. Now, you won't believe it, but we only got to see half of your interview with Dr. Saffer, because there's just so much content to consider. So what we'll do is in our next podcast, we'll watch the second part of that lovely interview. And I know there's even more information that we're going to get from it.
And I think that's so important. We don't want to cut out the information. The interview is so rich in information and beneficial to the average person out there.
Sure.
And I think that would be great. And I think there are a lot of learnings. So look forward to the next podcast, part 2.
Sure.
Great.
What we'll do now is, as we said, Alan's not here, but I've got to chat to him earlier. Today we're going to cover a very hot topic: to broker or not to broker. And you know, you've dealt with brokers extensively in your career and continue to do so. And we've had some questions which I'm sure you'll be able to help us with. I mean, one of the questions that came through is, in this healthcare funding space, why is it important to have a broker? Do brokers matter?
Warren, thank you very much for the question. And for our viewers, yes, it is very, very important to have brokers in the healthcare space. And there's a number of reasons, and I'll walk through them. Brokers operate in a tightly regulated space, and these are strictly enforced by the Medical Schemes Act via the Council of Medical Schemes.
Yeah, that makes sense that we have this tight regulation. And I would assume that if you want to be a broker, you've got to be accredited. Does someone have to be accredited to be a broker?
Warren, yes, definitely. You need to be accredited. And the big question, obviously, is why. They must apply in writing to the registrar. That's the Register of Medical Schemes. This application must include their qualifications, detailed industry experience. This, of course, accreditation is formal and a non-negotiable process if you want to do business in healthcare.
Again, it all makes sense to me. So the broker's registered, he's accredited. Are these rules around this enforced?
Warren, yes, the rules are very, very strictly enforced because we have two regulatory authorities in what we call FSCA, the Financial Services Conduct Authority, and CMS, Council of Medical Schemes. Brokers must compile a full needs analysis for each client that they deal with. It's a quite demanding space, requiring in-depth policy and legislative understanding, and this knowledge is really what makes brokers special in our space.
Absolutely. So I'm glad that there is that regulation. And then obviously for all these services, do clients pay commission? Do they pay brokers directly? How does the commission work?
Commission is 3% of your annual premium, and this is regulated by the ministry, and it's paid by the medical scheme itself, deducted, meaning coming off the premium that the member pays to the medical scheme in return for healthcare benefits.
Okay.
This commission, of course, drives brokers to deliver ongoing value to the member because it's paid on a monthly basis as long as the member is still on the medical scheme.
Okay. Well, that again makes sense. And you know, what is the advantage to having this accredited broker?
Of course, brokers act independently, and they always act in favor of the member, because de facto is the member who pays the commission.
Yeah.
They are not aligned to a single scheme.
Mm-hmm.
Most brokers are normally contracted to 5, 6 and more schemes, so they are definitely not aligned to a medical scheme. Understanding the benefit options across medical schemes is a key quality that drives advice in the industry.
So you're getting that impartial advice. And you know, you're a broker. How do you stay sharp and current so that you can give your clients this best service?
Yeah. It's important, it's a very, very important, it's most probably the most important question in the broker environment. Annual benefit review is a process that takes place on a yearly basis in the medical schemes environment. It's incumbent upon brokers to have product training on an annual basis so that they understand not only the benefit changes but the financial impact on members. They must themselves complete on an annual basis continuous professional development,
Okay.
the so-called CPD,
Yeah.
and earn points for that. Ongoing learning ensures that they deliver top-notch advice and service to members.
I mean, it's now almost self-explanatory why you'd want to make use of a broker. I mean, brokers are not just salespeople.
Yes,
They're qualified professionals.
correct.
They trusted advisors, and I'm sure we can agree. If you have access to an accredited broker, use them.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, thanks very much for giving us that information, and we look forward to the next episode.
Thank you very much, and it's very nice to be on a podcast, and we will keep you updated on developments in the industry, developments within our own business. Thank you very much, Warren, for having me on the podcast today.
Sure.
Wow, Warren, that was fantastic. I think it just was very explanatory in terms of the important role brokers play
Sure.
in this field, and to learn a bit about it. I think the average person out there doesn't really know much about it, and I think it tackled the topic and answered a lot of the questions.
And you know, for both of these little inserts we had, you mentioned how does it affect the average person?
Yes.
And that is so important, that this is what the podcast is about.
Sure.
We want to give our viewers access to what the average man might not otherwise have got. But thanks to the Inside Track,
Yes.
we're bringing it to you.
Exactly. And if there are any questions arising out of that, as we said, please, it's Ask Dr. Avron at totalrisksa.co.za.
Sure.
Just send the questions in.
Sure. What I'd like to, just before we end, we've got these questions that have come in already on your email line,
Right.
and historically. So again, just following up on the series of Gap Cover 101, we like to call it. Some of the myths, some of the questions around gap cover. I mean, for example, is gap cover a substitute for medical aid? And no, the answer is emphatically no. Gap cover is not a substitute for medical aid. It's an insurance policy that works alongside your medical aid to provide the additional financial assistance, especially during those hospital procedures.
Sure. And Warren, it's so important to remember that people think, well, I'm just going to get gap cover.
Yeah.
I'll buy down, I'll cancel my medical aid and get gap cover. You
No,
can't
you
do
can't
that,
do that.
right?
No, you can't do
need to have medical aid in order to have the gap cover, which closes the gap. And
Sure,
we'll talk
sure,
about
sure.
that, right?
And another one, what does the gap insurance policy typically cover? So, you know, there's the normal, what we spoke about this in our last podcast, the difference between medical aid rates and private rates. But there's a whole lot of other things, co-payment cover, sublimit cover, and some of these policies are even offering these nice value adds, like a travel benefit or casualty cover and policy extenders, that sort of thing. So a gap cover is not just covering that initial
Yes.
gap, but there's a lot of other benefits linked to it.
Great.
Does gap cover apply to out-of-hospital treatments? Now, we know traditionally gap cover is designed to cover your in-hospital shortfalls, but we do know that between what TRA offers you and some of our competitors, there are out-of-hospital procedures that the medical aid is approved as in hospital, so it's in lieu of a hospital,
Yes.
comes out of the major medical benefit or your
Right.
hospital benefit, but it takes place outside of a hospital.
Right.
We've got a standard a standard list of those procedures, and so that does apply.
So I think it would be important for consumers and our members out there to
Sure.
actually know what's being covered and what's not,
Sure.
and actually to look into the gap cover they're purchasing
Yeah,
to see what's
absolutely.
covered.
Absolutely. I think the last one that we'll cover today, are there waiting periods for gap cover? And this is we could spend
Sure,
a whole day
sure,
on gap on waiting
Sure,
periods,
sure.
purely because a lot of people would join a gap cover the minute they need it. And that's the reason why an insurance policy would insist on a waiting period. So we've got a 3-month general waiting period in the industry, but TRA doesn't impose that. So if you join today, you can claim today. Obviously, certain terms and conditions apply to that, but we don't impose the general waiting period on a TRA point of view. But then you get your 12-month pre-existing condition or your condition-specific waiting period. And as I mentioned, those are designed to prevent the scheme from claims that arise exactly when someone needs them.
Right.
Which and it's a standard process across the industry to have waiting periods to prevent
Sure.
that anti-selection.
Sure.
So I mean, those are some of the lovely
Yeah, I
questions
think
we
that
had.
fact that TRA doesn't have that waiting period, that general waiting period, I think it's a major benefit.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I think that's fantastic.
Absolutely.
So most would have the 3-month
Correct.
waiting period.
Correct.
But it's also understandable the condition specific. I mean,
Yeah.
if you know you've got a condition, then you can't join the gap cover and expect to get covered
Correct.
the next day. So
Correct.
members need to find that out.
Yeah. I mean, we always, when we do our training, we always explain to our brokers and to policyholders that you can liken it to motor vehicle insurance. You don't crash your car and then
Sure,
go and get
sure,
insurance
sure,
for it.
sure.
You know, you take it out in the event of, in case of. So that's exactly what gap
Great.
cover is about. So, yeah, I think today's been
Yeah.
fantastic.
No, amazing. And I think this Gap 101 is incredible. And
Yeah.
we'd ask our listeners and who are out there just if they've got any further questions like what we covered today or any other
Yeah,
questions.
no,
on
we'll
Gap cover.
carry on. I think we've got enough content to last us quite some time, but we want more.
Exactly.
Because we know there's still so much misinformation out in the
Great.
market. So, yeah, I think today's been great, and thank you again
Excellent.
for
No, thank you.
for arranging your
Yes.
your guest, and to Alan
Yes.
earlier. I think it's as you know by now,
Yes.
the person who has the final
Yes.
say in our TRA world is Gappy. So
Exactly.
over to you, and
Great.
we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Warren. Cheers, everyone.
Don't stress, the gap is covered.
Well, there we go. Thank you to the TRA team and to you for watching the Inside Track. Until next time, bye for now.